Our next guest is Susan Quilliam, who has spent decades helping people on the topics of love, relationships, and sex. Susan has published over 22 books in 33 languages. Susan, such a pleasure to have you on. You've updated the book, The Joy of Sex, and written books such as How to Choose a Partner. It's the biggest decision in life, the most value-add decision. Certainly, it's obvious that people struggle with working out how to do that, one. And two, maybe in some ways underinvest in that process. What's your view on that?
I think the words underinvest, I think people overinvest. So they take a great deal of time and space and trouble to hit the apps and search for a partner. And then at that point, they're so keen to get a relationship that they often have a sort of mind blank of, yes, I've got somebody, it's going to work, of course it's going to work. And so they go for relationships which may not serve. And then, to add insult to injury, they end up 3 or 4 years down the line. They've got their partner, they were happy, and then, as with all human relationships, the gaps start to show. And that's when they panic and they don't know what to do. We all want a relationship. As you said, it's so important, but we've never been taught, we've never learned how to run a relationship. So it's all wonderful, and we've got someone, and then when it goes wrong, we don't know what to do.
There's a bit of a point there, which is, it sounds like maybe finding the right person, but actually managing that relationship is perhaps where many of the challenges lie.
Yes, I draw a distinction between finding and choosing a partner and finding and choosing a relationship. Because remember that a partnership is formed of two people. And the whole idea of compatibility, are we compatible? Are we compatible? The point there is that two people getting together make a very different recipe from two people separately. So you have to look not only at the specifications of your partner, but also about the mix you get when you not only met, not only sat together, not only fallen in love, hopefully, but also started a relationship, manage the practicalities of that. What happens in that dynamic? The partner may be perfect, partnership, not so much.
And tell us what you mean by that.
The mix of two people is different from the way two people are separately. John and Mary. John may be a perfectly competent, emotionally literate, nice guy, and Mary may be his equivalent. But if they meet and get on at the beginning, what may happen over time is that particular mixture just doesn't work. And sadly, the more it doesn't work, the more upset we get, and the less we manage it. And then it's one of those vicious spirals that goes downwards. I'm not being catastrophic here. Many relationships work well. But the sad fact is that nowadays, the divorce rate, let's say people who marry today, the divorce rate will be approaching 50%. So 50% of relationships that are formalized today will end at some point, sooner rather than later. So what we're looking for is not a partner that I can commit to. It's a relationship that's going to last and get better over time. And that's a very different skill set. And it's a very different set of reasons for choosing the partner and the partnership in the first place.
There is a lot to unpack. I'm convinced that the best relationships are so much better than we realize, and the worst relationships have so much more pain than we realize. Do you agree with that? Can you give us some insight into what great looks like? I'd then really love to dive into some of the fragments of why things are grey, and maybe some epic relationships that you've heard about and had shared to you, and things that we can learn from those.
Absolutely. Let's start with your first point. Do I agree that the best relationships are wonderful, even more than we realise, and the worst relationships are worse? Absolutely. One of the interesting things there is that the relationships we see in the media are not trumpeted as a wonderful relationship, X has fallen in love with Y. What we don't see is the quiet and steady contentment of a relationship that has lasted 50 years. Because from the outside, it looks boring. And from the inside, it's a constant journey of support and growth. And each person helping the other one to fulfill their potential. And I'm not even talking about children. Having children is also wonderful. Let's just focus on partnership for a moment. That can change people for the better. It can help them through the worst times in life. And yeah, far more wonderful. The other side of it is that the worst relationships can destroy you. It can make you, man or woman, feel bad about yourself, bad about your life, unable to step aside from that for a number of reasons. Fear of failure, feeling that you don't want to let your partner down. Although I was saying before that divorce is more common, and it is certainly easier in the Western world than it used to be. People do hang on in there, often for themselves, often for the sake of children, in utter misery, going through life knowing that this is it for the rest of their lives, but terrified to leave and unhappy in staying.
You mentioned a wonderful word there, which is contentment. Certainly in my journey, I look at some good moments. I think, wow, this is what content feels like. It's rather an interesting word. And what you allude to is one could be walking through past a restaurant, seeing couples not talking, maybe in silence. And from the outside, that might not look like much fun, but actually, probably in many cases, potentially utter peace. Talk to us about you in your time. You've been an Agony on writer. You've replied to over 25,000 letters. You will, in your time, have seen people who you have been incredibly moved by how they approach relationships in a good way. Talk to us about that in terms of their approach and the things that we can learn from that.
Yes, you're right. I got my first Agony art column, advice column, in 1992. I would love to say that at the time I was 5 years old, but I wasn't. I was 42. So the last 40 years, 30 years more or less, some of the most heartrending letters. I'll give you one example. I received a letter back in the day when letters were written rather than emailed. And so I had a piece of paper in front of me, and the story on the first page was of a woman who, their first night with her husband, things had not gone well in the bedroom. And she was wondering whether they could save their sex life. Could they reclaim their sex life? And so I read down the first page, and I read about how they really loved each other, still loved each other. And I turned to the page expecting to find the words, "We were married last summer," or "We were married 2 years ago." And I'm thinking, 2 years, and okay, sex is not everything. But she wanted to have sex, and her husband wanted to have sex with her. So yes, this is really sad. I get to the end of the letter, and the PS is, "We got married 25 years ago." And I'm thinking, first of all, what a tragedy of living a life where not only was there no sex, which to some couples is fine, not only was there no sex, but they want it to be. They want to have a sex life. And secondly, what courage it takes after 25 years to put your head above the parapet and say, "We're not having sex. We want to change this. We still love each other. Please help us." The courage it takes to do that. So that's at one end of the spectrum. And then people usually write to me about problems. And my work also includes coaching, personal coaching, and I've written books, and people write to me about the books. And some people write and say, "We just want you to know that we are happy." And they're describing a life, married life or partnered life, short or long, where they've had problems. but they've overcome them. They've had tragedies. They've maybe had a sick child or a bereavement or a challenge or an affair. And they've gone, no, this is worth working for. And equally, some people leave, and that takes courage too. But they turn it round and they say, okay, the next relationship, we're going to keep the lessons and we're going to do better. So absolutely a spread of all sorts of stories. And I have to say that I find all of them inspirational.
It's very clear when we're chatting to some people and the way they interact with their partner, just how much joy they bring to each other. Do you have advice for people in terms of how to... I think it's quite interesting where people come from in terms of how they view a relationship, right? What can they give their partner and what does communication look like? Share your view about how these people get it right.
It's an interesting phrase, getting it right, because it changes. What is useful and helpful at the beginning of a relationship when you're just getting to know each other may not be what's wanted. At the beginning, ask questions. Throughout a relationship, ask questions. But particularly at the beginning, get to know the other person. Are you at ease with them? Are they at ease with you? Above all, and this is a touchstone, are you motivated to make the other person happy? There's so much emphasis nowadays on, I want a relationship because it's going to make me happy. I want a relationship because it's going to give me the ability to have children, or the ability to feel good about myself, or the ability to trust myself and have self-confidence. But the other touchstone is this a person I could give to as well as take from? And frankly, if you can't, they're probably the wrong person for you. Now, longer term, the advice is still the same. Keep asking questions. Because the thing that we don't realize about people in relationships is that you change. So the person you meet on the first date, and it's really nice and it's sparkling, it's wonderful, it's not going to be the person you're going to be in relationship with 5 years later, or 10 years later, or 50 years later. I've this year been to 2 parties for couples who have stayed together 50 years. It's like, wow, different people. They will have changed and they will have changed each other. So you need to keep asking questions. And if a couple comes to me for coaching and says, we're bored, I'm looking at, how can you get interested again? And sometimes it's simply realize that the person you're with is not the same person. So actually, you need to keep asking the questions and finding out who you are, and also sharing who you are with your partner. So you mentioned communication earlier, of course, but it's communicating, not just telling the other person, but asking the other person and encouraging them to ask you, how was your day? It's not a trivial question. It's a question that says to the other person, tell me who you are today. Let me learn you. Let me continue to learn you. And let me continue to learn you for 50 years.
Such a beautiful comment, and it's very simple. I really love the nature that something can be applied for people every day, and it's such a small attitude that costs nothing. Are there other things that you can think of that looking at it just do make a real difference? And I appreciate people are very different in terms of what they need. We get told about this thing called love languages, etc. But what are the questions that you think really make people feel like close to one another, or can help bind people during difficult times or as people change? Maybe it's weekly actions, just the concept of continued dating, taking it in turns on owning an evening and gifting that person a really special experience. There just must be things that one can do to keep life exciting, keep that person feeling special. Do you have views there?
Yes, a number of things. making somebody else feel special or helping them to feel special. One really important word, and that's attention. So if you're with your partner, it's really good not to be more with your phone than with your partner. And I'm not saying you should never check your phone. I'm not saying that phones aren't hugely important. But if somebody is telling you something about their day and you're not really listening, no, put the phone down or put the cooking pot down or switch off the television. And even just 5 minutes a day of, I'm with you, I'm listening, I'm interested, I'm focused completely on you, can be a hugely important part of a relationship. And notice I said 5 minutes, doesn't need 24 hours, doesn't even need an hour. So even if you have children, it should be possible just to say, I'm with you, and I'm with you for 5 minutes because you're important. And then, yes, please, give me that back. There are 3 other points I want to make about this, and they're not quite so specific. But what I've found in all my work is that if a couple is compatible on 3 out of 4 criteria, they're usually doing pretty well. And here are the 4 criteria. Do you get on day to day? Are you comfortable with each other? If you're not, you really need to look at that, because if you're with a partner that you're not comfortable with, if you're constantly irritated, if you're constantly finding them uninteresting, if you're constantly feeling critical of them, or are they feeling critical about you, then you do need to look carefully at what's happening and do something about it. That's the first element. The second element is, when you have a problem, can you solve it? I'm not saying, it's a good aphorism, but I'm not saying never go to sleep on a row. Yeah, it's good, but sometimes you want to simmer overnight or even for a week. But there's this therapeutic term, rupture and repair. In other words, if you have a clash, if you have a difference, if you're screaming at each other, what happens next? Do you then come back together? Maybe say sorry, maybe smile, maybe bring flowers. I mean, whatever way, and you mentioned love languages, whatever way is important to your partner, are you willing to say, let's make up now? And are they willing to accept that? Are you not doing the dance of, well, if you want me, I don't want you. Or if you're nice to me, then I'm just going to shout at you a bit more just to make it clear that you're not winning me over that way. So number 1 is, do you get on well? Largely, most of the time. Number 2 is, when you don't get on well, can you come back together? Maybe not tonight, but no, we felt bad about each other for 3 months. You do rupture, will do, and then you repair. The other 2 criteria I would use, and unfortunately they only become clear over time, although there's a way around that. The first one is, if you as a couple, or one of you as an individual, hit a crisis, and I'm going to get a bit serious now, maybe you get a phone call and something terrible has happened to one of your parents, or I hope not, one of your children, or you suddenly find that you've lost your job, or you've been in a bad car accident, that crisis where, yeah, there's something badly wrong. Can you step up for each other in the way that you need to? And I'm going to tell an anecdote here, which still makes me tearful when I think about it. I was teaching a workshop, teaching a seminar, and it was about relationships. And I mentioned this being there for a crisis. And afterwards, a woman came up to me and she said, I need to share something with you. Okay, I'm here. She said, I've just been diagnosed with a terminal brain tumour. And I obviously expressed my sympathy. And she said, no, I thought that was coming and it's awful, but she said, the thing that has broken me if 2 days after I had that news, my partner said that it was too much for him to bear, he packed his bags and left. Okay. Will your partner stand by you through chemotherapy? Will your partner stand by you while you grieve a parent? Will your partner stand by you when you've lost your job? And will they stand by you in the way you need, rather than, we just need to carry on, no, I need to cry? Or, I think you ought to cry. No, to be honest with you, I just need to carry on. So, can you get on day to day? Can you rupture and repair? Can you stand by each other in crisis? The fourth test and the fourth way forward doesn't seem obvious, and it's, can you celebrate with each other? But if you gain a job, if you get pregnant when you've wanted to, these joy moments, is the other person just going, oh, that's very well, I'm going to watch television? Or are they saying, how do you want to celebrate? Are you able to say to your partner, how should we celebrate? And so, day to day, rupture and repair, crisis and celebration. If you've got 3 out of the 4 of those, you're doing well. If you've got 4 out of 4, you're doing brilliantly. If you've just got 1, you need to start doing something different. That's useful for people to know.
Thanks so much for making that so clear, and each of those are very thought-provoking. Question I have is, sometimes, I guess in a relationship, you've got 3 relationships happening. You've got the relationship with yourself, you've got the relationship with your partner, and then you've got their relationship with themselves.
Nice.
And all 3 of which are moving the whole time to different degrees. Now, what if you really like someone, but they've just got chaos going on at the moment, and they just don't have emotional availability, or they're not able to bring you into their world in a way that is emotionally secure in the way that they want to. They do want you, but they just struggle based on what's going on. I guess part of that is managing that in itself. And then the second part is also, some people unfortunately just go through so much anxiety and are set in a certain way, and I'm sure they can change in certain ways, but to a degree, the whole concept of, can you actually change people? You've got that whole dynamic. There's 2 parts to that question. What are your thoughts there?
It's such a good question, because we all live busy lives. I think what we're looking at there is this temporary chaos for somebody else, or is it permanent chaos? Somebody who has a very busy life, it may just be the wrong moment for them. They're really interested in having a relationship with you, but they just don't have the bandwidth. Now, my advice there would be quite simple. Stay friends. Don't get too involved, because this may not work out, but be there for them. Make sure you see each other regularly. Make sure you continue to state that you're still interested. Check out whether they are. Put a time limit on it. Maybe 3 months. If at the end of that time you are losing interest, be clear about that. If they are losing interest, make sure that's clear. But also with that time, have a look at the overall pattern. I have known people, both personally and professionally, where life is always a catastrophe. And they may move into and out of relationships, but the underlying pattern is that they're never quite available. And they don't mean to be awkward in that respect. But it's not a good relationship to join them in. There is always going to be something else that claims their attention away from you. And however much it hurts, it's best for you, and probably best for them, not to add to their chaos by entering the first stages of what could be an important relationship. But let's take a real example. Somebody's recovering from a bereavement, and it's going to be a hard time, and they really want to be in a relationship with you, but they are busy grieving and maybe doing practical things, but underneath everything, there is this mourning going on that they are doing really well and it will probably come to an end. And in that situation, I return to my original advice, which is stay friends. Don't put yourself or them under pressure by moving it on to a relationship. But there is hope. And almost certainly as they come out of whatever catastrophe they've just suffered, your relationship will be stronger. And then you can start facing the challenges of love.
Thank you for that. And fear can dictate huge influence in our relationship with ourselves and also with other people, friends, partners, etc., etc. And that can come out and change how it can dictate to people, maybe to like controlling you or pushing you away, even though you're all they want. How does one deal with that? It feels too simple just to take a view that, oh, it's not worth working on. Can people get over those behaviors? And at what point does one call a spade and say, no, this doesn't work?
I think there are a few things to look at here. The first is, are you finding that a lot of the people they're trying to have partnerships with are what's called in the trade avoidance? That they want a relationship, then they pull back from it. They get into a relationship and then they're never quite committed. And there is a point to be made here of why are you in that relationship as well as what are they doing? So I'm not saying that it's anybody's fault. This is just something that happens. But I think a lot of continually being attracted to people who have a tendency to avoid is something that needs to be considered from both sides. But let's say that this is the first time it's happened, and the person that you really want to be in love with is just pulling back. It's long-term and short-term. It's this relationship one that needs to be made safer for the other person. Are they in a phase of their life where they're just a little wary of what's happened? Or is it that they have continually been frightened of relationships? If, for example, none of the relationships that somebody has had in the past have lasted more than 3 months, there's nothing wrong with that. But what it suggests is that if you have a relationship with them, it will end after 3 months. And that's the point when, to come back to your lovely question, one has to call a spade and say, is this a path that your potential partner has, which means that they're just not in the right space to commit? And the way to reassure yourself on that is that it's not you. It's somebody getting stuck in a pattern of fear around relationships. And then you have the choice. Are you going to hang in there and try and help them through it by making them feel more secure or help them to feel more confident? Or is it that actually you haven't got a boundary? There's a really general point here. It's not necessarily about what the other person can do. It's what are you prepared to do? Do you feel able to give to them? Or is it that you're already frustrated, you're already quite angry? Or you are anxious. You could be anxious. Why is this happening? In which case, it is probably best to move on to somebody with whom you are more comfortable and you used the word earlier in this interview, and more contented. Real love doesn't look like chaos. It looks like contentment.
Really, yeah, fantastic words. Dating. Some people seem to really enjoy getting drunk on the first few dates. And I guess that there are some senses that can serve people, have fun, work out how much they enjoy the other person's company, and it can help them maybe ease nerves, for example. But the concept of getting to know someone in a slower way, over coffee, very sober, and just working out if, what that person's like without alcohol, etc. What's your view on that? What are we getting right about dating at the moment, and what could we be doing to get it even more?
The key question here is, what do you want? Are you aiming at a lot of really fun connections where you learn about yourselves, you learn about other people, You learn, if you like, what works and what doesn't. Yeah, short dates, often but not always ending up in bed, often but not always ending up in great fun. Opening the possibility that this might not be a partnership, it could be a good friendship. Nothing wrong with that. Unless the people you are dating think that something else is happening. On either side, it's not fair to pretend you want a long-term relationship, whereas what you really want is to have a good friend with or without benefits. That's the first point. If you are in that stage of life, and that could be 25, 45, 65, where what you want is a good connection leading to a long-term relationship, possibly with children, possibly with commitment. This is serious rather than casual, and both are valid. Then you have to take a very different approach. You have to make sure that my phrase is, make friends before you make love. And I'm not only talking about sex there. It's like getting to know somebody, allowing them to get to know you, testing out the compatibility, similar in the right ways. Could you live with this person? Do you trust them? All the points I was making earlier around, is this somebody with whom you can have day-to-day enjoyable contentment, plus the ability to resolve distance, plus the ability to navigate life's challenges? That, I think, you need to take more time. And in order to love, or in order to make love, whatever that means for you, I think this is not something that ideally you rush into. Take things slowly. If you're not going to stay together, there's nothing to be lost in taking it slowly. And if you are going to stay together, even more, I am not talking about wait a year before you talk of long-term future. I am saying that thinking that the first date means you're going to be together for life is missing the point. You need to find out an awful lot more. There's an information gathering phase where, without judgment, you find out, could I live with this person? And that can take time. I just want to step sideways from the question you asked and say that some cultures, I'm not judging one way or the other, some cultures support that more than others. And you need to work within your culture and within your ability to be satisfied with what's happening. In general, I would say take more time to finalise and solidify a long-term relationship than if you are looking for company and fun and enjoyment initially. But it doesn't really matter if you don't stay together.
So information gathering is such an interesting one. What, I guess, part of it, you want to be quite relaxed probably on how you work out things about people and making people feel at ease. But what to you are the things that you encourage people to learn about from someone else in the early stage of dating, if you're looking for a long-term partner?
At the most basic level, you need to find out if your values fit. Are you completely committed to being a workaholic? And not a lot is going to change that. You really don't want to be paired with somebody who has a very strong value with lifestyle, working, I don't know, the minimum 30 hours a week, but taking as many holidays as possible. You will probably drive each other crazy. I want to add that there's nothing wrong with either of those. There's nothing wrong with working long hours, and there's nothing wrong with working short hours. If you are, for example, a homebody, largely, you like staying at home, you're comfortable there, it's probably not wise to pair with somebody who'd spent a lot of time travelling.
Hi listeners, we really hope you enjoyed this episode. The second part of this episode will be coming out in the coming weeks. If you've got suggestions on who you want to hear next, do get in touch. Perhaps you know someone great. We would love all of your ideas or even feedback. If you want to get more involved, you can join our Patrons membership community via the link below, where you can pay from as little as $2 a month influence future episodes, ask previous guests questions, and really get insight into what the production process looks like. We are so grateful for you listening. Thanks so much.